check. What was the last topic we have finished? What was it? So transportation we have finished. Transportation in plants did we finish? Check. Transportation in plants did we finish? So what was the last? Transportation in animals, human, that is, check the topics. What are we already done? Structure, function of the heart, are we done? Yes. Double circulation, that flow chart, did we discuss? Double circulation, did we discuss? And arteries, veins, vessels, valves, did we discuss? Yes. Did we solve questions from here? No, I suppose. No. Take out your volume, all of you. Take out your volume. इसमें जगह है ना ज़्यादा? इसको ले लो ना. All of you have got such health like a core of you can easily fit. वो थोड़ा सा हेल्दी है, दोनों का तो दोनों मिला के एक हो. Look into page number 156. See the question number 12 for transportation. Page 156, question number 12 for transportation. We are already done with that question. That is question number 12. We are already finished. We already wrote no last class. Yes. Arteries and veins. I already gave. So just take those questions which we are done. 12. All the important questions we will solve in the class, but that again does not mean that you will not look into the rest of the questions. Every question you will try to solve. Look now, next page 156, question number 24. 24, transportation under transportation check, 157, 24. 157, 24. Give reasons for the following. Let us write down those answers. Number one, arteries are thick wall. If you write those? No. Arteries are thick wall. Let us write that. What would the answer be?
The high pressure.
To resist the high pressure. Okay, right? Arteries are thick walls. Right? The flow of blood in the arteries. Flow of blood in the arteries are at high pressure. Flow of blood. What happened? What did you write down there? Flow of blood in the arteries are at high pressure due to the pumping action of the heart. Due to the pumping action of the heart. Full stop. Arteries are thick walled. Arteries are thick walled to resist the high pressure. Arteries are thick walled to resist the high pressure. Right, the next. Blood goes only once through the heart in fishes. Right, the next. Okay, continue. Others, right? The question: blood goes only through the heart, once through the heart in fishes. What should the answer be? What did we discuss? Now, remember we were talking about four-chambered heart. And in the four-chambered heart, any particular amount of blood would enter the heart how many times? 2 times. Once the right side, then the left side. What is this pattern of circulation known as? Double circulation. But in the case of fishes, what did we learn? In the case of fishes, the fishes have got only one upper chamber, the auricle, and one lower chamber, the ventricle. Now the blood would enter the auricle, come down to the ventricle, go out to the body again. For us, in our body, there is a different system. From the left ventricle, the blood goes to the body, and from the body enters the right auricle. And from the respiratory organ, it enters separately. No? From the respiratory organ. From the lungs, does it enter separately into the left auricle by the way of the pulmonary veins? Yes. In case of those lower vertebrates, if I talk about the fishes, if I talk about the amphibians and the reptiles, this method is not there. For them, body parts and the respiratory organ is the same thing. The blood is entering from those body parts into the auricle, coming down to the ventricle, going down to the body again. From the auricle, ventricle to the body again. But for us, how is it more beneficial? Because from the respiratory organ, separately it is entering into the left part, then going to the left ventricle. And that pure blood or oxygenated blood is going to the body, and from the body, the impure blood again to the right side. So that is the difference when we are talking about. Single circulation is shown in fishes. Single circulation is shown in reptiles and the amphibians, which has got either 2-chambered or 3-chambered hearts. So what is happening majorly in their heart, which is not happening in ours? The mixing of the blood. The mixing of the blood. So if the mixing of the blood is happening, the oxygenated and the deoxygenated is constantly mixing. Will the supply of oxygen to the tissues be very high? No, because partially deoxygenated blood भी तो हमेशा tissues के आसपास जा रहा है. So obviously the oxygen supply to the tissues is much lesser than our body, our heart. It's not so. That is the concept that we have, right? Blood goes only once through the heart in fishes, right? Fishes have 2-chambered heart. Fishes have 2-chambered heart. Fishes have 2-chambered heart. You are a new admission. You are joining from today.
No,
No, biology class today. No. Now, which school? Bodha. You are also from Bodha, no? You and 3 of you. You are not friends with them.
she's in my class.
Hmm?
She's in my class.
Okay. So now, I said what? Fishes have 2-chambered heart. Full stop. The blood from the body tissues. Blood from the body tissues enter the auricle. Blood from the body tissues enter the auricle. Blood from the body tissues enter the auricle. Goes down to ventricles. Goes down to ventricles. And to the body parts. Blood from body enter the auricle. Then to the ventricles. And to the body parts. Full stop. There is mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. There is mixing of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood. This pattern of single circulation, supplies lesser amount of oxygen. This pattern of single circulation supplies lesser amount of oxygen to the tissues. Lesser amount of oxygen to the tissues. Number C, plant transportation we are going to study now, but let us pattern is known as single circulation, which provides lesser amount of oxygen supply. The moment we are comparing double and single circulation always provides lesser amount of oxygen supply to the tissues. Plant transportation we haven't studied, but let us complete this question. Then after that we are going to take that topic. Write down. Plants have low energy needs. Now, low in comparison with what? Animals. Now, can you tell me that why should the plant have low energy needs in comparison to an animal? I talk about locomotion. I may talk about one animal, one plant of the same weight, of the same mass, same weight, but then where will be the oxygen demand more and where will be the energy release more? Obviously, in case of an animal, of course, in case of an animal, I will compare a small rat with a shrub, almost the same body weight. But then, if I talk about the animal, the energy requirement, the oxygen requirement or the energy release by the animal is always much more because animals constantly keep on showing locomotion. But for a plant, though the plant is allowing the process of transportation of the water, minerals and food and cell division and growth, but then the process of locomotion is not there. Locomotion is not there. Right now, plants have low energy needs. Plants have low energy needs. Answer. Energy requirement for a plant is comparatively lesser than an animal. This is because plants do not show locomotion. This is because plants do not show locomotion. Aram se ho jayega. This is because plants show locomotion. Good stuff.
Plants do not.
Plants do not show locomotion. Good stuff. Next line. Plants show few movements. Plants show few movements, such as transport of water minerals, soluble food, transport of water, minerals, soluble food, growth and cell division, which require smaller amount of energy. Take the next question, 25(1). Now, when we started discussing about the structure of the heart, we already learned. Now, see here, if you look at the structure of the heart, again, all of you look into this image there. If you look into the structure of the heart, the wall of the auricle and the wall of the ventricle, what is the difference you come across? The wall of the auricle is always thin. I first of all compare the wall of the auricle with that of the wall of the ventricle. Always to remember, the force of contraction of the auricle, mild. The force of contraction is not vigorous. The force of contraction, the auricle is contracting with a minimal force. Why? because they have to push the blood only till the ventricle, the next chamber, which is very close. So that is one comparison. The second comparison is the right ventricle and the left ventricle. If you remember, when we had drawn the diagram also, I made it a point, I told you that when you are drawing the diagram, the wall of the right ventricle should be narrow, thin, as compared to the wall of the left ventricle always. Now, the wall of the right ventricle is comparatively thinner than the left ventricle. What is the reason I told you that time? Again, always to remember, the wall thin means the force of contraction is less. So wherever we are talking about the wall thin, meaning the force of contraction is less. So if I talk about that the wall of the right ventricle is thin, force of contraction of the right ventricle is much lesser than the force of contraction of the left ventricle. But why? What did you learn? The blood from the right ventricle is going where? And then lungs. The heart and the lungs are nearby organs. So the force of contraction can be a little bit lesser also. But what about the left ventricle? Why the wall is so thick? Because the force of contraction is vigorous. High force of contraction, the pressure with which the blood will be pumped out where? Into the aorta. And from this aorta should carry blood, or the blood pressure in the aorta has to be very high. Because unless and until the blood pressure in the aorta is very high, the blood will not spread very fast through those hundreds of arteries and those capillaries to reach the furthest parts of our body. We are talking about the heart in the chest region, but the blood has to reach our fingertips also, the toes also. And that's how long does it take? Just few minutes. Just few minutes, not even a minute, I should say, lesser than a minute. So now, in certain regions of our body, the blood just rushes in a minute. So just imagine that the force of contraction of the left ventricle is so high, and that is the reason the blood can rush out into the aorta and then spread all throughout those arteries and the capillaries and reach the furthest part of the body in just a very short period of time. But comparatively, when we are talking about the right ventricle can contract at a much milder force because it has to push the blood only to the nearby organ. The lungs and the heart, they are just nearby organs. So the force of contraction need not be that high. Let us write those two questions. First, you take this. Ventricles have thicker walls than atria. What is the reason that ventricles have got thicker walls than atria? Ventricles have thicker walls than atria. 25-1. Write on that question. Answer. Ventricles have to pump the blood, away from the heart. Ventricles have to pump the blood away from the heart. And hence, the force of contraction is much higher. Force of contraction is much higher than force of what I said? Force of contraction. Force of contraction is much higher than the atria, which contracts with minimum force, as the blood has to flow down, only till the next chamber. As the blood has to flow down only till the next chamber. Similarly, one more question you are asked, that is, why is the wall of the right ventricle thicker, left ventricle thicker than the right ventricle? Let us take that question also. So this set of questions we have done. Few reasons. Similarly, keep writing down the next one. The wall of left ventricle is thicker. Wall of left ventricle is thicker than wall of right ventricle. Wall of left ventricle is thicker than wall of right ventricle. Wall of left ventricle is thicker than wall of right ventricle. Let us write down that answer. The left ventricle contracts at a much greater force as it has to push the blood into the aorta, as it has to push the blood into the aorta to reach the farthest region of the body, farthest, F-A-R-T-H-E-S-T, to reach the farthest region of the body in a very short period of time. Full stop. In contrast, the right ventricle has to pump blood. Right ventricle has to pump blood only till the nearby organ, the lungs. Only till the nearby organ, the lungs. And hence, the force of contraction is mild. And hence, the force of contraction is mild. So, try answering now 25-2. Try answering 25-2. This answer you will not only write one word or one couple of words, you have to write a proper sentence. What should you write? I give you 2-3 minutes. Bring one answer there. The question says, when a person gets injured, the blood leaks at the site of injury. How is the leakage of the blood stopped? They're only not asking you the name of the cells. How is the leakage stopped? So, in a couple of sentences, you have to write down this answer. I told you the other day also that whenever we suffer from any cut, wound, or an injury, what happens at that site of injury? A set of chemical reactions starts taking place, and this initiates how? Because of the platelets releasing variety of enzymes, and the process of clotting starts, resulting in the formation of a flood sort of at the site of injury, which does not allow the oozing of the blood anymore. So just a couple of sentences to write down. Write down there. The name of the cells, of course, to mention. Name the, where is it? When a person, okay. How is the leakage stopped? Right? At the site of injury, platelets release certain enzymes. At the site of injury, platelets release certain enzymes. which bring about a sequence of chemical reactions, which bring about a sequence of chemical reactions, sequence of chemical reactions which result in the formation of a plug, PLUG, results in the formation of a plug consisting of proteins and dead blood cells. Consisting of proteins and dead blood cells. Full stop. This is known as the clot. This is known as the clot, which prevents the leakage of the blood and the process is known as clotting. Now there are many more questions which you will go through, find out whether you know the answers for all of them. If you have a doubt, you are going to ask. Now straight away go to page 161. 161, try solving question number 2. 161, look for the answers. Page 161, question number 62. 161, question number 62. Now only the first answer I'll give you. The rest you all are supposed to know. The membrane that encloses the heart. Now this I have not mentioned. I suppose if I talk about the entire heart, now what is this heart made up of? What type of muscles? Cardiac muscles. But surrounding the heart, if I talk about the outer wall, the surrounding of the heart, the outer wall of the heart is made up of epithelial tissues. The outer wall is made up of epithelial tissues, and what is the outer covering of the heart known as? The outer covering of the heart is known as pericardium. What is the outer covering of the heart known as? Pericardium. Pericardium is the membranous covering made up of epithelial tissues. So write down that and start doing the rest of the questions. You may do in the volume itself, only one word or at the most couple of words to write for the answers. If you have a doubt, you will clarify. Any confusion is there? Liquid tissue found in the human body. Answer है liquid part of the blood. Answer है plasma. Liquid part of the blood, then plasma. Liquid tissue, will you write lymph for this answer? Liquid tissue found in the human body. Will you write lymph? No, blood. Name the types of liquid or name the types of body fluids like blood and lymph. Done? Make it fast. Huh? No. Done, all of you done? Bolo, read out the question. This question you are asking me. Respiration हो गया, transportation हो गया. Now, what is the respiratory pigment? Hemoglobin. So, in this entire chapter, now try to understand the relation. We had already studied nutrition. Nutrition, what did you understand? The food that we eat has to get broken down. Now, the food that gets broken down, what are the simplest form of the nutrients? We had studied glucose, digested to form glucose. Don't write simple sugar, glucose. And when we are talking about proteins, fats, and glycerol. What happens to these molecules now after the process of digestion is over? Where does digestion of food complete? Where is the process of digestion completed? Small intestine. What happens to these molecules? Absorb meaning what? Where are these nutrients going? Into the blood. Into the blood. Now they are getting absorbed. What is the meaning of absorption? From the intestine go into the blood. Go into the blood meaning what? Are they entering the blood cells or dissolved in the plasma? Dissolved in the plasma. Now that they are dissolved in the plasma, the blood transports all throughout the body by the way of those arteries and capillaries. Whenever the blood is coming in contact with the tissues, whenever the blood comes in contact with the tissues, are we understanding a situation where the capillaries are running over the tissues and the process of diffusion happening? Yes. So now when we are talking about that the blood runs in those capillaries and comes in contact with any particular tissue of the body, the nutrients will enter into the body cells. What happens to those nutrients? So immediately you'll have to remember a situation something like this. Now that you know all these three parts of the chapter, I am talking about these situation, and there is the blood and the nutrients are constantly getting diffused, something like this. So what is happening to the glucose molecules? For an example, now that the blood has a whole lot of glucose by the process of nutrition, digestion all over, absorption all over. Now in this cell, enough of glucose. So what is the blood bringing and giving to the cell? Two major components very much needed for our body. What is the first component? Glucose that I am talking about, provide energy. And what is the second component that I am talking about? Oxygen. So by the way of respiration, you have studied blood will provide oxygen to the cells. By the way of nutrition absorption, you have studied blood will provide glucose to the cells. Now, with those two components, what is the cell doing? Breakdown of glucose. What is this process of breakdown of the glucose known as? What is the process of breakdown of the glucose known as? Cellular respiration. Now, cellular respiration will give rise to what? Cellular respiration will provide, when I ask what are the components, what are the products of cellular respiration? Two things, of course, to mention. What are the two components majorly you should write? Cellular respiration gives rise to carbon dioxide and ATP. Carbon dioxide and ATP. What happens to that carbon dioxide? Go back to the blood again. And by the way of the lungs, exhale out. But is it all the carbon dioxide exhaled out? No. Only small amount of it. Where is the larger amount remaining back? The larger amount is remaining back in the form of bicarbonates, and only smaller amounts in the blood combined with hemoglobin come to the lungs. So what is the relation you have studied? You had already studied about nutrition, then the concept of respiration, then the concept of transportation also we are going to come across. And the last part that we are going to come across is that like the bicarbonates, there are so many different type of waste substances that will remain in the blood which cannot be coming out or which cannot be thrown out by the way of the lungs. Now what is the fate of those waste substances? The kidney has to deal with them. The kidney has to deal with variety of such type of substances that has to be thrown out of the body, and that is the last part that we are going to come across, excretion. But before that, we'll study the process of transportation in plants. What about the concept of transportation in plants? Do the plants need to transport substances? What type of substances the plant need to transport? Water, minerals, and you studied no photosynthesis? Food. So now a plant produces food by the way of photosynthesis, but can the food remain concentrated at one particular region? No. The leaves are preparing the food. Now if I talk about that this particular plant, the leaves are preparing the food. The leaves are preparing the food. Can the food remain concentrated in the leaf only? No, the stem also needs the food. The root also needs the food. So we understand that when we have to talk about the process of transportation in the plants, the process of transportation of the plants, number one, what type of substances to be transported? Transport of water and minerals, transport of soluble food. So when I talk about transport of water, minerals, then what type of tissue I am to understand? Transport of water, minerals by the way of xylem. Transport of water, minerals by the way of xylem. So we are talking about what is the role of the xylem? The transport of water and minerals. What is the function of the xylem? The transport of the water and minerals. What are the types of cells of the xylem? And I think this is just one batch out of all the batches I go where they could answer all the four types of cells. So which are the four types of cells? Tracheates and vessels and parenchyma and fibroids. These are the four types of cells. The specific functions no need, but whenever you are asked to write this answer, the names of the four different types of cells should be mentioned in your answer. Because generally you will get this type of a question, explain the process of transport of water minerals by the xylem for 3 marks. It's a 3-mark question that you will be always asked. You will have to remember, you have to mention the names of the cells. That the xylem is made up of now these different types of cells. Now, these different types of cells, the vessels and the tracheids and the parenchyma and the fibers, all these different type of cells ultimately result in the formation of a tubular arrangement way inside the plant. Now, connecting which parts? They would be connecting the root to the upper parts of the plant. Now, understand this concept, very simple. Few concepts only to understand, few things only to remember. We are talking about the transport of food, transport of water minerals first of all, transport of water minerals by the way of the xylem. First thing, where is the xylem present? The xylem is actually connecting the root to the leaves. It is just like a tube-like structure connecting the root and the stem and the branches and the twigs and the leaves, all these parts. More or less, if I talk about the location of the location of the xylem is almost the center of the root and the stem and the twigs and the branches, little bit away from the center if I talk about the leaf. Then what is the location, what is the position of the phloem, which also results in the formation of a tube. The phloem is always on the either side of the xylem. So first of all, to remember the location, how is the xylem and the phloem tube arranged in a plant? The xylem is always in the center and the phloem is always on the either side. The phloem always on either side of the xylem and the xylem. Meaning, if I say that if I take a stem and just scrap off the central region, now this is the stem, I try to cut the central, disturb the central region. After a week or so, we will see that the upper part of the plant, the leaves are all drying out. Why? Because we have disturbed the xylem. If you make a cut at the deeper part of the stem and the upper part of the plant will dry out very soon. But just scrap off the bark part little bit, undisturb the central region, not a problem, the leaf will still survive for a long time because the xylem disturbed, the plant is not getting water from the soil and it will dry out very fast. So that gives us an impression, and that is very much experimentally understood, that the xylem is always in the central region of the stem, root, and the branches and the twigs, etc., and the phloem on the either side. So first of all, we are going to talk about the xylem and how does it allow or how does it bring about the process of absorption. Now, to understand that, first of all, I have to come across that this xylem, which is in the form of a tube, all these 4 types of cells in the form of a tube, and they are connecting the root cells. Now, I understand that these are the root cells. This is the root cell. This is the root cell. Surrounding the root cell, what? A whole lot of water. Surrounding the root cell is water. I'm talking about the soil water. Surrounding the root cell is the soil water. Now, of course, the water is here also. The water is here also. What else? If I have to talk about the root cell, I only cannot think of the water. I also have to think about some solutes which are there in the root cells. So now, one of those cells, first try to understand how does or why does the water enter. Now, this is the root cell that I'm talking about. This root cell has got the vacuole. The vacuole has got the solute and the water molecule. The vacuole has got the solute and the water molecule. So now when I talk about the water molecule, I'm going to compare the water molecule in the soil and in the cell. So just follow the figure that when we are talking about the solute molecule, look for the solute molecule. Which one is the solute molecule? I'm understanding that this is the solute molecule and this is the water molecule. Look for the figure and try to tell me here that according to this figure that I say that this is the soil water. This is the soil water and this is the cell that I talk about. Where is the water more? Outside in the soil. I would say that a medium way water is more and solute is less. What is this type of a medium called? A solution, right? Yes, it is a solution, I can say, because water mixed with various high alkaline pH we are not talking. So now when we are talking about, understand, I'm just trying to compare that kahan pe water zyada, kahan pe solute zyada. I'm saying that this is a solution. ये भी एक solution है. Inside the plant cell, the mixture of the water and the solute को क्या कहते हैं? The vacuole has got what? Water No, the vacuole has sap. So sap is a mixture of what? Water and variety of solute. What is the definition of the word sap? A mixture. एक solution है. Now I am comparing this sap with the soil water, and more or less every time it is this situation where the soil has more water than the solute, and the sap has less amount of water and more of solute. Remember, you may ask me that how is it possible? It is obvious that the soil will always have more amount of water, and we are talking about those small microscopic cells, how much of the capacity inside the vacuole, not that. I'm talking about 1 ml of solute, 1 ml of sap from here and 1 ml of soil water, and then the comparison. Understood? The comparison is always volume by volume. वैसे तो obviously यहाँ पे water ज़्यादा ही होगा, and then the water amount here, how much would be the capacity? Little bit. Not that. I'm talking about one volume of 1 ml of this and 1 ml of this. कौन से ज़्यादा concentrated है? Here, this is always dilute. तो इसको क्या बोलेंगे? This is hypotonic. The sap is always concentrated. तो इसको क्या बोलेंगे? What is it? Hypertonic. The moment I talk about hypertonic, you have to understand that the solute is more and the water part is less. And the moment we talk about hypotonic, you have to understand the water part is more and the solute part is comparatively less. Now, if this is the story, then what should be the direction of water movement?
Upwards.
Soil to cell. No? Soil to cell. Okay. So I would say that is this the movement of the water molecule? Yes, this is the movement of the water molecule. Is the water molecule or are the molecules moving from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration? And I'm talking about only water molecules. So what is this process now? Osmosis. So what is the definition of osmosis? Movement of the water molecule from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. So this is the process. This is the reason. This is the process why the water molecule is constantly entering into the root cells. Why? Constantly the water is absorbed by the root cells. Yes, this is the process because एक तो cell sap जो है, the cell sap is always concentrated as compared to the soil water. So the tendency of the water molecule will be always to enter the cell, not to come out from the cell. The tendency of the water will always be to enter the cell but not to come out from the cell because ये है hypertonic concentrated medium and ये है dilute medium. ये है एक reason. But now when the water is filled up here, now next part, the water will go to the next cell. एक cell fill हो गया. Where will the water go now? Surplus water कहाँ जाएगा? To the next cell. This cell is also now filled up. Where will the surplus water go? Again to the next cell. And this is how the water molecule will start entering now to the xylem tube. So this is the method by which the water molecule is entering now the xylem tube. Now I understand that the water molecule is filling up the xylem tube. Again, remember, I am talking about the xylem tube, which is made up of 4 types of cells in a proper cylindrical arrangement. And this is what I just show in the form of a tube now here. And we are now more or less understanding that the xylem tube is filled with water. Certain properties of the water always to remember in the xylem tube that the water molecules, they always love each other so much. And they always cling to each other always. The water molecules never travel as single molecules all throughout the tube, but always in a chain, always in a train. On top of that, something more that we have to understand is constantly one process that is happening is transpiration. One process that is constantly happening by the leaves or that is taking place by the leaves of the plants is transpiration. Then what is transpiration? Loss of water in the form of water vapor. Now we are talking about loss of water in the form of water vapor. What is the state of the water vapor, remember? And which process I am talking about? I am talking about a process known as transpiration. What is the definition of this process? What is transpiration? Loss of water in the form of water vapor. Now if that is true, and now that if the environmental conditions are like this, hot and dry, then the rate of water loss in the form of water vapor is much more. And every time we come across that in the xylem tube, since the loss of water in the form of water vapor is happening, So definitely in the xylem tube, there is an empty space always getting created. Why? Because a whole lot of water getting lost in the form of water vapor. So from time to time, now this is what is happening. So what am I saying? That ye jo xylem tube may whatever amount of water was there, from time to time small amount of water constantly lost in the form of vapor. Immediately this empty space has to be filled in. Whatever amount of empty space has been created due to the loss of the water, this empty space has to be filled in. How will this empty space be filled in? The water will start moving up. But as single molecules? No, always as a chain. The water molecule always moves up in a tray. The water molecule always moves up in a tray. Now, if that is true, that the water molecule is moving up, then obviously here there will be an empty space after some time. Because the water molecule is moving up, pura change of upar jayega. Obviously, this entire tube, earlier there was a empty space here. To fill up this empty space, the entire trail of molecules, the entire chain of molecules moved up. Now there's a empty space created at the level of the roots. How will this be filled up? By this method. How will this be filled up? By this method. But the moment the rate of transpiration is high and this pulling force, because of the empty space, there is a pulling force which is, जैसे ही ये space create होगा, ये process और fast हो जाएगा. Yes or no? Now this particular pulling force which is created due to a very high rate of transpiration, what is this pulling force known as? This pulling force is known as transpirational pull. What is transpirational pull? The pulling force which is developed at the level of the roots which allow continuous absorption of water. So अब जब ये empty space create हुआ है, this only will allow the more and more absorption of water. When will this be filled up? Under what different conditions? The rate of transpiration has to be very high. Then this space created. When this space created, more and more absorption of water. So now immediately more and more water entering and the process goes on. Can you tell me when will this space or when will this process of transpiration be much lower? And when will the absorption of water also be much lower? Comparatively at night, and when even more lower during the monsoon. During the monsoon, when the process of transpiration is much lower, जब transpiration very low हो रहा है, if I understand that the process of transpiration is very low now because the air is already humid, the air is already moist. During the monsoon time, the air is already moist. So थोड़ा सा ही transpiration, so थोड़ा सा ही suction pull रहेगा, थोड़ा सा ही pulling force रहेगा. And now, if I talk about at this hot weather, dry condition, the pulling force also will be much more. And if the pulling force is much more, what will happen? The rate of osmosis also will be much more. Are you understanding the relation? So whenever we are talking about the process of transportation by the way of the xylem, what are the features to understand? The xylem is present in the form of a tube, the first point always to write, and it is located where? Centrally always. Now, the xylem tube is filled with water, but from time to time, the process of transpiration is happening. So, what are the steps one by one we understand? Yes, transpiration. Transpiration will result in the formation of transpirational pull. And now that we talk about transpirational pull, the third is what? A process known as osmosis. What is the definition of osmosis? The movement of water from low. But what is the direction of the water there? What is the direction of water movement? Always in one direction, from the soil to the upper parts of the plant. Can I talk about the movement can be in multi different directions? No, it is only in one direction, unidirectional. The movement of the water minerals by the xylem is unidirectional. From where to where? Always from the soil to the upper parts of the plant, and this process is in a sequence one after the other happening. But now that I talk about the phloem, now I talk about the second type of tissues. What are the second type of tissues? The second type of tissues are phloem. What is the job of the phloem? The phloem helps in transport of soluble food. Food and soluble food. the transport of soluble food. Soluble food, when I say, you already understand that if now that the food molecules are formed, say suppose now I understand that the food molecules are formed. What is the form of the food? Glucose. But will the food be transported in the form of glucose?
No.
In what form?
Glucose.
Sucrose. In the form of sucrose. You had already studied that the glucose immediately gets converted to a bit complex form, and this bit complex form is known as the sucrose, and this will now get dissolved in the cells of the phloem. So if I say that now this gets dissolved in the cells of the phloem and now they get transported, cells in the phloem and now they get transported. But if I talk about the phloem tube will allow the transportation of the food in all different directions. So the phloem is allowing the transport of food in all different directions, not like the xylem in only one particular direction from the soil to the upper part. I may understand that these leaves which are preparing the food may allow the distribution this side, may allow the distribution this side, may allow the distribution this side also, and downwards also. So what is the difference I am talking about? If it is phloem, again to remember the types of cells, which are the cells of the phloem, number one? Companion cells, sieve tube, next sieve tube का sieve plate same ही है. So we talk about the sieve tube. Because the sieve tube sample the sieve plate and the parenchyma. Okay. So again I tell you this cells types to just mention in your answer. And now that we are talking about the types of the cells, they will again result in the formation of a tube surrounding the xylem. Surrounding the xylem. How will they transport the food? In the soluble form. The transport of the food is always in the soluble form, in the form of sucrose. Soluble, when I say, again you have to understand that the phloem cells also will be having the sap and the molecules of the sucrose dissolved in the sap, and then they move from one cell to the other in the soluble form. But in what type of a direction? Again, the third difference to talk about xylem, again with xylem, in all different directions. A leaf preparing food. A leaf preparing food. Now I talk about a leaf preparing food. Is it remaining concentrated in only one particular direction, that it moves only downwards? No, it may move sideways also, it may move upward also, and the food may come down to the roots and the stem also. So what are the three differences now that you understand? Transport of the xylem and the phloem, transport of the water minerals and the food. If I talk about the first difference, for the xylem, the types of the cells that you mentioned, this is one point always to remember. Second, what are you mentioning? What type of transport they carry out? If it is the xylem, they would carry out the transport of water minerals, and if it is the phloem, they will always carry out the transport of the soluble food. Number three, if it is a xylem, the movement is unidirectional from the soil to the upper parts of the plant, and if it is a phloem, the movement is in all possible directions from the leaf to all different directions of the plant. Okay, so based on these 3 points, you have to write down the description. And for xylem, additionally, generally you get on xylem the question, the process of water transport only you get. For xylem, additionally, you'll have to also talk about the transpiration, the transpirational pull, and the osmosis part. For phloem, nothing like that. No such processes included in your syllabus to understand as such, but there are many processes also there. So that's why I have talked about only the processes of xylem. So which are the processes you have to mention? You have to mention about the role of the transpiration. How is transpiration responsible for creating the suction force? And the suction force, the greater, the pulling force, the greater will be the osmosis. Did you understand the relation one after the other? So this is what you have to write and describe. Okay. The answer is there in your volume. Read and find out if it is understood. If not, again tell me. But you have to write down the answer based on these 3 points only. So this is a short topic on the transport of food. How about the transport of food and the transportation in plants? Now, after this, we are to move on to the last section of the chapter, that is, we are to study about the processes of excretion and the organs in human. To talk about the concept of excretion, we are now trying to understand that the process of excretion is majorly by the filtration of the blood. We have already studied about the process of circulation. Now we are okay. Now transportation in plants that you understand. Those of you have the textbook. Is there any figure given? Just check. I don't remember. In the volume, I don't think we have included any figure. Take out your textbook. Just check if there's any figure there. For transportation, is there any figure? That plant, only that, no? Only that. About the cells and the tissues, there is no diagram as such, so there is no chance of any diagram drawing in this topic. So there will be no diagram drawing also in this topic, only to understand the major steps, processes, only that. We are talking about excretion now. The last section of the chapter, excretion. How do we define excretion? What is the definition of this word? Removal of the waste substances. How about the filtration of the blood? What is the relation with transportation and the next section, excretion, that you understand? I had already been talking about a while ago that when I talked about the bicarbonates dissolved in the water, so there are many such type of substances which get dissolved in the blood plasma. And these substances have to be now released, but how? By the way of specialized organs known as the kidneys. So as we talk about the concept of excretion, what will be the definition? The definition always to be written this: the process of removal of waste substances, process of removal of the waste substances by the filtration of the blood. Process of removal of the waste substances by the filtration of the blood. So when we are talking about the process of filtration of the blood, now as we talk about filtration of the blood, where should the filtration of the blood happen? Specialized structures, organs in our body known as the kidneys. We're going to learn about the kidneys, but as we try understanding that what are some of the organs of excretion that we have in our body, what type of substances they're excreting out, releasing out. The first that I would talk about is the liver. Is the liver an excretory organ? Is the liver considered as an excretory organ? Yes. What reference? When we are talking about the liver, what is the first reference to understand? The amino acids. From where do we get amino acids? Amino acids, after the process of absorption, digestion, absorption, proteins are completely broken down to amino acids, and these amino acids, by the way of blood circulation, when they get deposited into the liver cells, what will happen to the amino acids? These amino acids also will get converted to certain products. It is actually certain form of carbohydrates also. So I would say that these amino acids are also getting broken down to certain different products, and in that process, urea is getting formed. What is urea? A major nitrogenous waste substance formed in our body. Extremely toxic. Our body cannot resist to have a high concentration of urea at all. And that's the reason the kidneys constantly are to throw out this urea from our body. If this particular type of nitrogenous waste substances remain in our body for a longer time, we'll start having different type of abnormalities in the cells, improper functions of the body cells. So one I am talking about is how can we consider the liver as an excretory organ, because the amino acids which are deposited can get converted into urea. But there are other different type of nitrogenous waste substances also. Did you come across uric acid? Did you ever come across this word uric acid? At the same time, there are some others also to understand known as creatinine. Did you ever come across this word creatinine? These are all different type of poisonous substances which are formed in our blood or released in our blood, formed in our body cells and released in our blood. So what do we generally term them as? These are known as nitrogenous wastes. In our body, these nitrogenous wastes are extremely toxic. They should not be retained in our body for a longer time. They have to be thrown out as much as possible. So this is one reason why the liver we can consider as excretory organ. Something more with reference to digestion that we had studied. We had already talked about the RBCs also. RBCs also. Now remember, with reference to digestion, we were talking about the bile pigments. What were those types of bile pigments? Which pigments are we talking about? Bile pigment. Did I mention the names of those pigments? At that time, did I mention the names of those pigments? Bile pigments, did I mention? Another reason, check if I have mentioned. If not, you'll have to take it down now. Hemoglobin. Where is hemoglobin present? RBC cells. Now, what is the relation? We are trying to understand how can liver be justified as an excretory organ. But remember, these are the secondary excretory organ and biliverdin. Yes, I mentioned that. So see there, when I talk about the RBCs, now this is more or less a combination of the concept of nutrition and transportation that I'm talking about. With reference to nutrition, I already told you the bile contains pigments known as bilirubin, biliverdin, bile pigments. And now now that you know the concept of transportation also, you are supposed to remember that the RBCs have got a particular pigment. Which one? Hemoglobin. RBCs have got a particular span. What is the span of RBC? Meaning they are functional only for a period of 120 days. So this RBC is after a period of 120 days. What will happen? Now they are dead cells. So this hemoglobin will start breaking down to pigments. Which pigments? Bilirubin and biliverdin. Bilirubin and biliverdin. So now that we are talking about bilirubin and biliverdin, this bilirubin and biliverdin will again get broken down to some other yellowish pigments. There's a name to that also, yellow pigments, and this gives color to, or this generally imparts a yellow color. So I would say that this yellow color is the color of the waste substances, the excretory waste substances that we are going to come across. So this is again, we are going to come across the later part of the chapter. What is the relation? How can we justify that liver is a accessory excretory organ? When I say accessory, meaning accessories, पता है accessories किसे कहते हैं?
Bracelet ring.
अरे वाह. Accessories.
Food basket.
हाँ. तो ब्रेसलेट रिंग अगर हम नहीं पहने तो चलेगा? चलता है.
It's a necessary.
नेसेसरी मतलब अगर मैं ब्रेसलेट नहीं पहनूं, रिंग्स नहीं पहनूं, ओके फंक्शन चलेगा, but then this is to add on to the function. तो अगर this particular function अगर हमारे बॉडी में नहीं हो रहा है, then the stress on the kidney is even more. अगर ये प्रोसेस हो रहा है, then the stress on the kidney is much lesser. So what is the job? We are trying to understand liver को excretory organ कैसे बोल सकते हैं? How can we justify? How can we understand that the liver is an excretory organ? Give reason. What are the points to write? This is what we'll have to write down, because amino acid in the liver can get converted or results in the formation of urea. Name the organ which forms the urea. This is a question you are asked. Name the organ which forms the urea. क्या लिखना है? Generally students would write kidney and come start fighting for the mark also. Ma'am, ये book में लिखा है. So now urea is never formed in the kidneys. Urea is always formed in the liver. The liver is producing the kidney. The liver is producing the urea. The kidney is only doing the job of throwing it out. Am I clear? अब next जो feature में discuss कर रही हूँ, that is about the bile pigments. The excretory wastes of our body generally has got a light yellowish color, and this is because of this particular reason. The hemoglobin gets broken down to two major pigments, bilirubin, biliverdin, and this again gets broken down to certain other pigments, giving the yellowish color. So this is about the liver. I talk about some other accessory organs. Which are the other accessory organs? Can I talk about lungs as an organ? Can lungs be considered as a accessory excretory organ? Q? Because lungs also help in release out of carbon dioxide by the process of exhalation. So when we are talking about lungs, the second accessory excretory organs I am talking about, these are all accessory excretory organs. These are all extra organs before we talk about the main organ. We are going to talk about the main organ, the kidneys. Before we talk about that, we are talking about some accessory organs. Now, how can the lungs be considered as an excretory organ? Lungs are considered as an excretory organ. To give the reason, you are to write because it can constantly release out carbon dioxide by the way of the lungs. Third, क्या है? Skin. Can we consider the skin as an organ? Yes. Because the skin releases sweat. The skin has got sweat glands and the skin releases the sweat. Talking about the composition of the sweat, what is the composition of the sweat? It has got water, variety of salts and traces of urea. It has got traces of urea. Now, since it has got traces of urea, so it is the skin also which is responsible for the release of the urea, but a very minimal amount. The skin is also releasing. क्या हो गया? Back शुरू हो गया? अभी तुझे मैं बाहर ही रखने वाली हूँ. Now, which are the main accessory organs about the human body? We are talking about 3 excretory organs, but which are additional with reference to the kidney. Which are the 3? The liver, the primary, and then we also talk about the lungs and the skin. Now, the fourth and the most important, now this is the major organ that we are talking about, which is the major organ that we understand. This is the kidneys. Start understanding the basic structure function now. But before we start, we are going to understand what is the kidney doing in our body. Number 1 is the kidney brings about the filtration of the blood. The filtration of the blood and release of what we will write down these 2 functions. Mention 2 functions of the kidney. There is a question in your paper quite a number of times. 2 functions of the kidney. Filtration of the blood and the release of nitrogenous wastes. Filtration of the blood and the release of nitrogenous wastes from the body. That is 1. And the second function is osmoregulation. What is osmoregulation? As and when the kidney is constantly allowing, or as and when the kidney is constantly going through a variety of processes to release all the nitrogenous waste substances from the body, it is also bringing about the maintenance of the salt and the water balance. The salt and the water balance in the body, and this is what is known as osmoregulation. So what are the 2 functions of the kidney that you should always write? The 2 functions of the kidney always are, number 1, filtration of the blood to release all the nitrogenous waste substances. Remember, there are many other substances that gets excreted out. Majorly we focus on the nitrogenous substances because they are extremely toxic. And the second function of the kidney is, as and when it carries out the first function, the second function, as it is happening in our body, the maintenance of the salt and the water. So we are going to learn in the next class how the organs, or what are the organs functions and how the process. Okay? Take a break, we'll continue again.
तो वहां जाके बैठ जाएगा क्या? वो वाले कॉलेज में
वो लोग नहीं जवाब वो लोग इसलिए पहला मैंने छोड़ा था ना भाई नहीं भाई नहीं होगा आराम से चालू करना वापस बंद कर ठीक है करता रहिए।